The inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. One of the most crowded races on the May 4th primary will be the contest for the 2nd Ohio Congressional District. The district is complex, stretching from the city neighborhoods in eastern Cincinnati through sprawling suburbs in Warren and Claremont counties, small towns and rural areas in Brown, Adams, Pike, and Scioto counties, and incorporating the city of Portsmouth. Taken together, the Republican and Democratic candidates represent many parts of this expansive district. Since August 2005, the district has been represented by Republican Congresswoman Jean Schmidt, the incumbent in this race. This morning, I'm joined by the 3 Republicans and then the 3 Democrats interested in replacing Schmidt, who is in Washington this morning, according to her office. We begin this morning with challengers in the Republican race. Mike Kilburn served 7 terms as a member of the Warren County Commission beginning in 1982. He is the co-owner of Stein Kilburn Funeral Home in Lebanon. Debbi Alsfelder is a first-time candidate for public office, a lawyer and a CPA from Mariemont. And Tim Martz, also a first-time candidate, lives in Indian Hill, has worked with private businesses, calling on both large corporations and small businesses in a very large area, but throughout the district. Welcome to Newsmakers. It's good to have you here. Tim, let's just start with you. But this is really for all of you. You're all Republicans. There is a Republican currently in the seat. What's the problem with Jean Schmidt from your point of view?
Back in the 80s, I was the biggest Ronald Reagan fan, I think, in the world. I totally bought into the idea of Reaganomics, where tax cuts and tax incentives would turn our economy around. And as you know, from a deep recession when he first got into office, the economy was turned around, so much so that the tax revenue actually that came in, even though tax rates were lowered, tax revenue.
Okay, but what about Jean Schmidt?
Okay, well, what I think happened is as Gingrich left, Newt Gingrich left, I believe that the Republicans lost their way. I do not believe that Jean Schmidt is a Reagan, Newt Gingrich Republican, and I do not believe she represents this district.
Even though her voting record is sort of consistently at very high rates by Republican evaluators? One of the largest bills in history was voted on, and she voted for it. And that bill she voted for, the TARP bill, supposedly was to help banks lend more money. Well, we know that really hasn't happened. It bailed out Wall Street, and also it was used to take over General Motors, a government takeover of General Motors. Mike, how about you on Jean Schmidt?
Well, I have a strong history of representing the constituents of Warren County as a conservative. We don't have revenue problems in Warren County, and we don't have spending problems. Jean Schmidt's a big spender. The Congress has lost its way on both sides of the aisle. Republicans have quit being conservative, and I can cite you many examples where Jean Schmidt has followed that lead. She's one of those Republicans that vote no and collect the dough. And these guys seem to feel like that their job is to bring money back to the district. That's not it. This country's going broke.
Is that part of their job?
No, it's not in my opinion. Okay. This country's going broke. But all these congressmen want to gain favor so that they can run again and be able to come back and tell the mayors or the county commissioners, look what I've done for you. That is a prescription for financial disaster in this country. Jean Schmidt is leading the pack. She's done it with me in Warren County, and I've said, Jean, we don't want the money. We're broke. You need to be conservative and always be conservative. She's not. She's a progressive. She believes in big programs. And
I want to keep it moving. Debbi, how about you? Anything to add to those?
Well, of course, the spending is an issue, and it's been all the Republicans as well as the Democrats. The Republicans really acted more like Democrats in the last 5 to 8 years before Obama came in. But also, I differ on my view of the Constitution and what the courts can do. I don't think the Constitution is a living document. There are limits on what the federal government is permitted to do and not to do, and I don't believe the court should be legislating from the bench. But
what does the House of Representatives have to do that? The Senate approves the nominees for the court.
Of course. the House needs to make the legislation clear so that the interpretation can be done without legislating from the bench. The House writes the legislation. I also think we need a leader as opposed to a foot soldier in Congress to try to find other like-minded people and get some changes through and get our country back on the right track.
Okay. Mike, on your website, on one part of it, you point out that you have signed the Cincinnati Tea Party Pledge for Limited Government.
Absolutely.
But on another section, you said, and I quote, that you support you have support for legislation making health insurance affordable and accessible for all Americans. Now, I suspect you don't support what was just passed.
No, I don't.
Okay, so how does that sentence fit with your position with the Tea Party and also with the recent legislation?
Well, there are certain things. Our healthcare system isn't broke. Our health insurance programs throughout this country need some changes. One of those changes we need is to take care of the issue of portability when you change jobs so that you can transfer your insurance from one work setting to another. The other area is pre-existing conditions. You know, my wife just passed away 2 years ago with cancer. Had we lost our insurance, she would have not been able to get.
So you're saying there are elements of the
exactly
of the reform that you would support,
exactly,
but other parts that you would roll back.
Oh, well, this whole new Obama healthcare plan, I believe, will have pixie dust sprinkled on it in January after the Republicans take this House back over, and we'll start all over again.
Okay. I want to keep everybody's voice in here. Okay. Tim, what about this on healthcare specifically?
On healthcare, we do not want a government takeover of the healthcare system. We have the finest healthcare system in the world.
Statistically, that's not true. I mean, in terms of outcomes, that is not what comes out on maternal deaths, on infant deaths. We're about in the middle of the pack.
From that standpoint, and that's one of the good things is. What we want affordable health care for all. And the way to do that is with competition. There's two areas. To answer that question, there's two areas. One is over 50% of the business in Ohio is controlled by two insurance companies. We need to solve that. And the other thing, when you talk about us being in the middle of the pack, we need regulatory reform. If we could get life-saving drugs and other drugs on the market sooner, we'd all be better off. It takes over 10 years to get a drug on the market these days.
You know, I saw that on your website, but there's a danger in that is rushing drugs to market. Then you have, are you undermining the FDA and the research, and then you end up with a problem of implications on those drugs.
I am certainly not talking about rushing drugs to market. The statistics are out there, the drugs are out there that have been just sitting and waiting, and they're stuck in the bureaucratic morass. I mean, if you want to mention specific drugs, I'll go ahead and mention them, but I'm just saying the problem is the bureaucracy, and I really want to bring the reform. So those two areas, by the finest healthcare, I mean it is top of the line. People come from all around the world to get operated on and get their diseases taken care of in the United States.
Okay, Debbie, where are you on healthcare?
Well, clearly we need some health care reform. I think the bill that was just passed is unconstitutional because it forces every American citizen to purchase something from a private company and then penalizes us for inaction. It's like the bubblegum example. While the government can regulate
Do you think state government can demand that everybody has automobile insurance before they get a license?
That's a state issue, absolutely.
But federal government cannot?
That's right. Federal government is limited by the Constitution. I think we do need some reforms. The federal government can facilitate those reforms by allowing purchase of insurance across state lines, encourage health savings accounts, allow an above-the-line deduction for everyone for their health insurance costs. But the federal government needs to stay within its constitutional authority. And on the other issue with this health care bill is the cost. It's a very large cost, and it's a big penalty on employers. They are adding 16,500 IRS employees to enforce this bill, and it's going to be a drag on our economy. And once you get these big entitlement, socialized health care type programs in place, they're hard to get rid of.
Okay, I want to keep moving on. Debbie, let's stay with you for a moment. On your website, you mentioned that you have 3 sons involved in the military,
Yes.
and you have a sentence that says that the military deserves, and you say, they also must be given clear mission and clear and reasonable rules of engagement.
Right.
Are you arguing that that does not exist now in Iraq and Afghanistan?
I am not arguing that, but I do think they need a clear mission, and there have been times when the mission was not clear, and I think the American people also need to understand the clear mission and what we're doing there.
Are you supportive of the current president, in this case the Democratic president's stance in Iraq and which is pulling down in Iraq and building up in Afghanistan? Are you supportive of those policies?
We are pulling down in Iraq, but I know for a fact that we're still sending new troops into Iraq.
Right.
So we aren't out of Iraq, and
No.
they're still going to be doing the same things that the combat troops have been doing. There's really no difference.
Okay. Do either of you want to comment on the current military stance?
The key to this is in Afghanistan, we have to train them to fight their own war. We're stepping in there. It worked in Iraq. The Iraqis had a pretty good system in place, and they're able to take over and defend their own country. And what's happening in Afghanistan, I'm afraid, is not that.
Not the same thing.
Yeah, we are not training them to fight their own war.
Mike, any quick comment?
Well, one of the things that we have to insist upon is that Iran does not become capable of developing a bomb that they can, put our lights out over here. At whatever cost we need to do that. I'm not sure that that the current policy is correct in the Middle East. I don't have the magic bullet answer to it, but I think we've been there too long, and I don't think we have a good mission over there. I don't think they know what they're doing in Washington. We didn't have an exit strategy under the previous administration. And it's a dangerous area, but we can't allow them to get the bomb.
May I just add something to
Yes,
that?
very quickly.
We cannot remake the world with our military. We just need to make sure that American lives are secure, our properties and our institutions for now and into the future.
Okay.
Well, we are the military world leader, and as I said, I think if we train the Iraqis to defend themselves, we're going to be fine.
Okay, one last quick question. I'm almost out of time. Begin with you, Tim. On the question of federal spending, all of you are opposed to federal spending and the size of the tax. Tell me one thing that you would want to, major thing that has implications that you would want to cut back, a program, federal program.
I do not want the federal government getting involved in the private sector, and by that
Concrete example.
I mean General Motors. They do not belong.
Okay.
They should not be involved in General Motors. I do not want them to be involved in the healthcare system.
Okay. What about Medicare or Medicaid?
In Medicare, that's a different system because they are not actually running the system. Okay. I'm afraid in the new healthcare system, they're going to be running the system.
Debbie, on taxes and spending, something you would be willing to cut, something major.
Well, I would be in favor of reworking the budgeting process and using a zero-based budgeting where we look at every program in every department. It takes a little more time on the front end, but then you look at all of them every year.
Is there a specific one you would cut?
Well, I think in the Department of Education, I think the federal government keeps too much of every dollar, up to 60%, and so there's not enough coming back to our schools, so I would want to look
Mike?
at that.
God only asks for 10% of our paycheck. The government takes 40%. There's a whole lot of programs that should be taken. Education should absolutely come back to the local level. I'm not sure that we have a reason to have the Department of Energy. Reagan dissolved the Department of Energy. We went without it for years. Those two could come immediately.
Thank you for being here this morning. We'll watch how this
you.
turns out on May the 4th. Stay
Thank
tuned
you,
after the break. The 3 candidates running in the Democratic primary. Welcome back. We now shift our focus to the Democratic race for the 2nd Congressional District. David Krikorian, a resident of Indian Hill, ran as an independent in the general election in 2008. This year, he is seeking the Democratic nomination. And Surya Yalamanchili Do it again.
Yalamanchili.
Yalamanchili, thank you, was born in Pennsylvania and first came to Cincinnati for a job at Procter & Gamble, is making his first run for political office. He lives in the city of Cincinnati. Thank you for being here this morning.
Thanks
and
for having
I
us.
apologize for blowing the name, but
just call me Chili.
Just call you Chili, and that's how it sort of gets shortened.
Only Chili on the ballot.
Okay. David, let's start out.
Sure.
2 years ago, I know one of the things you and I talked about, not just on the show, but afterwards for quite a while, was the whole question of the financial system and the financial reform. First off, what do you think ought to be done at this point? We're now almost a year and a half into the Obama administration. We still haven't gotten a financial banking reform through. There is one that's been introduced in the Senate.
Right.
What do you think should be done, and is the bill in the Senate the right bill?
Okay, first off, I would like to say that I'm actually from Madiera.
From Madiera?
My friends in Madiera would not forgive me if I didn't point that out. So
okay.
Go Mustangs.
All right.
And as far as the financial reform, to me, it's one of the most central things that needs to take place in our country. Absent any meaningful financial reform, we're never going to recover. And we have listed a whole bunch of reforms on our website, and they include things like, for example, there's a tremendous amount of money that comes in from political action committees representing financial services institutions. And I think if we really want to get at the heart of taking extreme amounts of leverage out of the system, for example, which is one of the major causes of the meltdown, or separating, for example, investment banking from commercial banking activities.
Which would be going back to where we were
going
before.
back to the Glass-Steagall era of legislation. And why did those things change? Why did we introduce so much leverage why was that enabled? Mm-hmm. And one of the main enablers was the pursuit of profit funded by campaign contributions from financial services firms to, unfortunately, congressmen and senators who allowed those laws to be changed.
Quick point here. Is the bill that is being pushed in the Senate right now, is it adequate to do that?
I don't think it does. No,
okay.
I don't think it does. I think there's some good components to it, but not adequate, no.
Chili, what about you?
Yeah, no, I think the bill doesn't go nearly far enough. I think we have to separate out. The banks are 80% casino, 20% actually doing the stuff that we need for the lifeblood of the American economy. And what happens when you're a casino is you make billions of dollars in profits sometimes, and they pay that out in bonuses. And when their bet doesn't work out, the taxpayers are holding the bag. Completely unacceptable. We have to separate out this behavior. And the reason we don't, though, is because they're the financial services industry is the leading donator to both parties over the last 2 decades.
Would you ban them from donating?
Well, we need fundamental campaign finance reform, and until we get that, it's going to be
so
very
it's not
difficult.
just targeted at
No, you can't. We could talk about
Absolutely.
every energy industry, agriculture.
Okay.
I mean, it's up and
Corporate
down.
welfare.
Okay.
Corporate welfare.
So would you one of the issues sort of when we went through the meltdown was certain firms were too big to fail. We couldn't afford to allow them to fail.
Right.
Can the government do anything?
Absolutely. As we discussed 2 years ago on your very program, I came out strongly in favor of breaking up some of these large investment banking companies like Citibank, like J.P. Morgan, like Goldman Sachs, breaking them up the same way Teddy Roosevelt and his trustbusters did to the oil companies, to the steel companies, to the railroads when they threatened our country's national interests.
Would you favor that same sort of thing?
Yeah, the reason that the banks became too big to fail is because we let them. We let this massive consolidation happen, even though it violated laws that are on the books now, and we need to fix that.
Well, isn't one of the arguments for the last 25 years, basically since Reagan, was that we need to deregulate? And we deregulated lots of things, including in the financial industry. Isn't that what?
Sure did.
Are you talking about re-regulation?
I'm saying enforcing the regulation that's currently on the books, because we have the laws in place. And what's happened is...
You still think there's sufficient laws in place?
I think we need some more, absolutely. But look, it's as you said, starting with Reagan, we had this era of, regulation is bad, free market can solve everything. And it's simply not the truth. Right. And we've seen it.
And to build on what Surya is saying, I do believe that it's not so much more regulation, it's better regulation, and it's allowing the regulators to actually enforce the regulations.
Let's take a look at one other issue that's out there, and I didn't see either of you exactly talking about it on your website, but you know, the 2nd District has a lot of coal power plants because it's the Ohio River and the coal is easily accessible. The question of nuclear.
Right.
Should the United States be moving, and we'll start with you, Surya, moving to the use of nuclear power, and would you, if you were elected, be willing to see a nuclear plant in your district?
Yeah, so it is on my website. I do talk about energy security, and my answer is yes. You know what? Yes to geothermal, yes to solar, yes to wind, yes to nuclear, yes to all of these. And we need a comprehensive solution. We've talked about energy reform for the last few decades. Presidents since Carter have talked about it, literally going back before Carter, and it's just lip service. And until we say that, you know what, everything is on the table, we're going to work on them, all of them, we're not going to have solutions. As far as nuclear, how does Japan, how does France, how do countries all over Europe use nuclear power so effectively and without safety issues? And I think we can do the same thing here. And I'm with the president, and I'm with the Republicans and Democrats in Congress who support this. Absolutely.
David?
Yeah, I mean, building upon that, we have a wonderful facility out in Piketon, which is in Pike County, and there are deals on the table right now, including one with Duke Energy and a consortium of some other players on a global scale to build a nuclear reactor. Not only to build a nuclear reactor in Piketon, but to also utilize the infrastructure that they have in place to become a supplier of nuclear fuel to other nuclear reactors, thereby making not just the 2nd Congressional District a district with a nuclear facility, but also a supplier to the global nuclear industry. And I think that's something that we have to get.
You know, one of the things in the stimulus package was creating jobs, but the other thing was investing in infrastructure.
Correct, yeah.
Is this a legitimate role for the federal government to play? And there's all kinds of questions about what the federal government should and should not do. Is investing in infrastructure a legitimate role, and are we doing it in a constructive way? David, let's start with you this time.
Answer to the first question, absolutely. The highway system couldn't have been built without the government. There is legitimate debate over whether or not we're doing everything that we possibly can the absolute correct way. I'm sure there's going to be mistakes that are being made, but the government has to play a role in this. And one of the main reasons is because oftentimes the return on investment is not immediate. And therefore, if you leave it just to private enterprise that is so focused on the short term, and that's fine, but they're so focused on the short term that oftentimes long-term projects can't get done because they can't get the financing.
They have to have somebody who can look ahead.
Exactly. So that's
Surya, what about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think infrastructure is a key part of the government, and I think though we're not funding them at the right priority levels. I think if you look at it, our own infrastructure is rated a D by our own government assessment. And the reason for that is because the process by which our infrastructure priorities are funded is terrible. I mean, it's haphazard. We need a national infrastructure bank where we have priority projects based on need, based on what's weak and what's about to deteriorate, and based on what's going to help fund investment in American jobs.
One last area that we have time for, and that is, what's your reaction to the health care bill that has now passed? If you're elected, you know, there's people talking about rolling it back. There's people about reforming the reform.
Right.
Surya, where are you? Yeah. And we have less than 2 minutes.
Sure. I've said since actually November that healthcare reform is essential, and I would support the current bill if it was the best we could do. I think there's a current bill that's still there, Wyden-Bennett. It's been there for a while, the Healthy Americans Act. It gives choice to both employers and employees, and it creates competition in the marketplace. It's the best according to the Congressional Budget Office, and it gets to near universal coverage. And so I think the bill that we do have now is an improvement. Half the bill, I've read most of the bill, half the bill are tests. It's painful. Half the bill are actually tests and experiments that we're hoping are going to bring down costs, because without action, we were going to have over $35 trillion in unfunded liabilities in Medicare and Medicaid.
David, what about the bill that was passed?
Well, I think, first of all, it's not going to be rescinded. Okay, so I think those talking points out of the Republican Party are frankly nonsense. Now, it can be improved. Okay, and one of the things that I would like to see done is to take away some of the mandates that force people to buy insurance. I have a difficult time with that because that gets into the Constitution.
But isn't that the only way that you can get enough people in the system?
Well, but that also will create a tremendous amount of unintended consequences. People will figure out ways to circumvent that process, and I think a lot of the anger in government today, among the people about this bill is the actual mandates for it.
I've got about 15 seconds. I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, I'm shaking my head because you can't have your cake and eat it too. The only way we can get rid of banning pre-existing conditions, and we can do that is by making sure. Oh, it is.
Not the
it
only
is.
way.
Every health economist that I've read says it is.
Very good. Thank you for being here.
Thank
we'll
you.
be taking a look on May the 4th and see how this turns out. Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. This and every show is streamed at local12.com on Monday. If you missed a show or a friend missed a show, especially going into the election, you can watch it online. Next week, the Democratic candidates for the Hamilton County Commission. Have a good week.
All right, thanks.
Stay